Recently, I visited the monastery of St. Anthony, which is in the heart of the Egyptian desert, and this experience gave me an opportunity to reflect on his amazing and influential life. From his time living in the desert to being in solitude in a cave in a mountain, St. Anthony is often considered the father or founder of monasticism, and he's been able to influence a plethora of other lives in the process. This video is going to review the life of St. Anthony. Learning from others is an important tool for both career, personal development, as a way to brainstorm, help calm anxieties, assist people with finding more meaning and purpose in life. So learning about the life of St. Anthony can help us to become more resilient, better handle our own struggles or challenges in life, whether it be mental health or just stress with daily life. St. Anthony, being left with a lot of money after his parents died, gave him an opportunity to reflect on the vanity of it is to inherit or to earn a lot of money. He began to think about the Christian life, about the apostles that gave up everything to follow Christ, which is explained in the Gospels. He began to think about those in need and that the people in the scriptures would often give to the people in need in hopes it would help them to get into heaven. So when he was 18 years old, St. Anthony was in church and a gospel verse was being read which said, Jesus said to him, "If you want to be perfect, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." St. Anthony owned something like 300 acres of land, which he gave away. He kept a little for himself and his sister. And then the next year, he came across another verse inside the church which said, "Do not worry about tomorrow." And with this verse, he gave up everything. His sister went into a convent, and St. Anthony began his life as a monk. Legend has it that St. Anthony initially started his monastic life near his home village next to the Nile River. Occasionally, he would hear of other people trying to live a virtuous monastic life, and he would go to them to seek wisdom, as it's said in the Bible, "But it's good to be zealous and a good thing always, and not only when I am present with you." And so after hearing their wisdom, he'd return back to his place. So he would seek wisdom whenever he could get it on how to progress in the spiritual life and get closer with God. St. Anthony really focused on his relationship with God, even limiting his relationships with friends and family to focus on his relationship with God. And this is what it said in the Gospels: "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." St. Anthony would do some work during the day, as it said, "If anyone does not work, neither shall he eat." And he was also trying to pray constantly while he was working and even throughout the day, as it said, "Pray without ceasing." St. Anthony not only had a really good memory from what he read, but he continued to learn about the virtues and good qualities of those around him. He was often known as the beloved of God, as he aimed to be the best in these virtuous qualities, which also inspired those around him. The devil would often try to attack St. Anthony, reminding him about his wealth or reminding him about his sister, trying various ways to make it more difficult for St. Anthony to persevere in the virtuous life. Although Anthony remained firm in his prayers and he cited different verses from the Bible or Psalms, such as, "The Lord is for me, therefore I shall see my desire on those who hate me," meaning the devils and demons. St. Anthony would often stay up all night for prayers. He would eat just once a day after sunset, and sometimes he'd eat after every other day or even go 4 days at a time without eating. And typically when he ate, he just ate bread and salt, and all he drank was water. He would sleep most often on the ground directly, and sometimes he used a mat to sleep on. St. Anthony believed that the mind of the soul is strong when the pleasures of the body are weak, and so he was really persistent in his fasting, in his prayers, and living an ascetic life. St. Anthony would not become lazy based on his accomplishments or achievements, but rather he would continue to work, which is in line with the Bible verse, "Forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to those things which are ahead." He knew that God was always present. In fact, when he mentioned the word "today," he used it as a reminder to stay with God and appear before God, having a pure heart and trying to do only what God would want him to do. This is similar to what the prophet Elijah said when he mentioned, "As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely present myself to him today." St. Anthony himself was known for saying that it's necessary for the ascetic to learn from the way of life of the great Elijah, to always examine one's life closely as in a mirror. The devil tried to torture Anthony various ways, whether it's physical, emotional, even mental. He would appear as people to beat him up, make a lot of noise in the background and try to take away his peace and solitude, and he would send beasts like animals to torture him. St. Anthony was confident that his wealth was in his virtuous qualities and God would protect him, as it said, "The rich man's wealth is a strong city and like a high wall in his own self-esteem." It was revealed to St. Anthony that God wanted to see St. Anthony's perseverance and endurance so that God could always help him and actually make him famous as a result. This is similar to what happened in the life of Abraham when Abraham had to sacrifice Isaac, and it was to make Abraham's faith known to a lot of humanity. St. Anthony really believed in the sign of the cross, and he said that the sign of the cross can be powerful, help strengthen and encourage people, and leave the demons to flee from the person who does the sign of the cross. The sign of the cross can scatter the enemies. As I said, let God arise, let his enemies be scattered, let those also hate him flee before him. St. Anthony was able to heal people who were sick with physical or spiritual diseases. He was provided them comforting and encouraging words, and he helped people to reconcile their differences and become friends, and encouraged many people to imitate his way of life. And so that's sort of how he became to be the father and founder of monasticism. Some of Anthony's ways to encourage the other monks or people living in solitude would advise them to continue to store treasures in heaven, as life on earth can range from 60, 70, or 100 years, but the next life will last for all the generations. And he reminds them of the verse that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. This helps put into perspective that someone giving up a few hundred acres of land is not much compared to what they can get in the next life. Rather than gathering possessions and earthly stuff, St. Anthony reminds us to acquire virtues such as thinking, prudence, being righteous, being courageous, understanding, kindness to the poor, having faith, being hospitable to others, and free from anger. St. Anthony was known to advise others that each day one must strive to do something to please God. For example, when waking up each day, to recall as if he's not going to be alive until the evening, and when going to sleep, think that they are not going to wake up in the morning. In other words, doing everything throughout the day with purpose. If we live a life expecting to die that day, we won't live with unnecessary possessions and will forgive everyone for everything much easier. It'll also help one to not regret their ascetic struggles, but will help them to apply the verse, "No one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God." So we won't look back on our previous lives or previous evils. Since the kingdom of God is within, virtue would come naturally as long as one sheds off evil or impure thoughts. The demons may pretend to recite from the Psalms, Scripture, or appear even as monks sharing godly wisdom. They may even encourage one to increase their asceticism. The demons can also make a lot of noise or commotion, but if they are ignored and disregarded, eventually their ways will extinguish. St. Anthony suggests to silence the demons by ignoring them. For example, it's quoted in the Psalms, "I was mute with silence, I held my peace even from good." And also, "Thus I am like a man who does not hear, and in whose mouth is no response." The demons, they may make threats of harm and evil, but they won't do any harm or evil. If they were powerful, they would not come with mobs, and if they could do any harm, they'd do it right away. To put it into perspective, God sent an angel to attack against the Assyrians and destroyed 185,000 quickly. The demons are afraid of fasting, vigil, prayers, gentleness, tranquility, poverty, moderation, humility, love of the poor, almsgiving, people being freed from anger, and devotion to Christ. As it said, "Behold, I give you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you." Demons may even report events happening ahead of time, for the demons might have bodies that are more subtle than the human beings can assess, and they could see people traveling from far away. But only God knows ahead about future events. So the demons report events sometimes as they are happening, but they don't know about the future events. St. Anthony's life reminds us that our goals are not for virtue or fame or being rewarded, but our goals in this life are to please God. But St. Anthony believes that a pure soul can even think more clearly and see better than the demons, especially since people are made in God's image and likeness, and that through the power of God, people have more power over the demons. St. Anthony says that demons may make similar noises as delinquent juveniles or robbers, and this can cause somebody to be initially afraid and shaken. But afterwards, if they are courageous and pray and reject the thoughts quickly, they can be filled with joy. In other words, a thought or sensation that causes disturbances is from evil. But while thinking of Christ and of Christ's strength, the joy that comes with Christ, the demons will go away. And this helps one to apply the Bible passage, do not believe every spirit. And one can ask the spirits, who are you and where are you from? Or they could do the sign of the cross. If it's from God, the feelings or thoughts or sensations will stay. But if it's from the devil, they will flee. Around the year 311 to 313, a lot of the Christians were being persecuted and being martyred for their faith. This was during the reign of Emperor Maximin, and Anthony went to Alexandria in hopes of being a martyr. However, God protected him from being killed so that he would continue to teach others about his ways of living and lead them in the spiritual life. Large crowds would follow Anthony to seek his help and guidance, and it was affecting his peace and quiet, so he went back off into the desert to find solitude. And he traveled to the desert with a group of people and eventually came across a spring of water on a mountain called Mount Colzim, and there's also a few palm trees here. And so this spring of water was basically what allowed Anthony to stay in solitude in the desert. And when I went to visit this monastery, the monk giving me a tour said that without the spring of water, there would be no monastery there. And for the past 26 years since he's been a monk in the monastery, he was studying how there could be this water in the middle of the desert, and he still couldn't discover how there could be this spring of water in the middle of the desert. Another story of how St. Anthony ended up in the desert was that while he was a monk living next to the Nile River, a woman went down to the river and began to bathe next to him. And then St. Anthony confronts her, asking her if she was not ashamed to bathe in front of a monk. And the woman tells him, if you were really a monk, you would be in the middle of the desert. Because at that time, there are other monks who were in the desert. They just weren't that well known at the time. So Anthony actually took this message as a message from God and went off into the Egyptian desert to live a life of solitude. Anyway, the people that traveled with St. Anthony left him some bread and would occasionally visit him to bring him some more bread and to seek his wisdom. But St. Anthony could tell that this commute was burdensome for them, so he eventually asked them for some grain, and he decided to make his own bread so that he wouldn't be too dependent or need to rely on others. And then he also began to grow vegetables because many travelers would come to visit him to seek his wisdom. And so he wanted to help nourish them and strengthen them because they traveled a far way to see him. And so now even to this day, the monastery will feed the visitors there for free. And many monasteries are self-sustaining in that they don't want to rely on other people, but they want to more self-sustain and rely on themselves in order to continue to grow and flourish. St. Anthony continued to struggle against the demons, but he wasn't harmed by them, and rather he persevered to fight them off by fasting, by prayer, and by spiritual practices. And St. Anthony would often remind the people that visited him to be sure to not let a day pass in sin. And he says that what will help to live a day not in sin is that if whatever one thinks or does during the day, he will have to share an account with other people about it, then it will help them to live a more pure and holy life. God would sometimes reveal to St. Anthony things in prayer, like there were two men walking in the desert, and one of them died from a lack of water, and the other was about to die from a lack of water, but Anthony was able to get this notion, and he was able to send men to help the one that was close to death by giving them water. And then some people might question, well, if St. Anthony could have these things revealed to him, why not God save both of the men from dying? But these questions are not really for man to judge as much as it is for God to judge. Around the year 337 and 338, St. Anthony returned back to Alexandria to help fight off the Arian heresy. So when he was in Alexandria, many people would flock to him, identifying him as a holy man and a man of God. People were concerned about the noise and commotion that these types of people would bring, and they were afraid that it would push Anthony back to the mountains. But Anthony claimed that the demons in the mountains brought about similar battles as the people in the city, and so St. Anthony was able to maintain his peace and quiet amidst that turmoil. When Constantine was emperor, him and his sons wrote to St. Anthony seeking advice, and St. Anthony replied back that he was glad that they were also looking to Christ as God. He advised them that Christ is the ultimate ruler, and he encouraged them to be just and help the poor. Anthony became famous because of his virtues and his pure soul, and people longed to be near him. He was well known and recognized for his love for God, and his fame was a gift from God as he spent his life in Egypt and often in solitude on a mountain, yet he was known all over the world. Much of what we know about St. Anthony's life is from a book written around the 4th century by St. Athanasius of Alexandria, who sought out to meet with Anthony and learn about his life and grow from him. We also know that St. Anthony was not the only person living like this at the time. There's another well-known monk, St. Paul the Hermit, who is also living a life of solitude in the desert. And there's a picture of the two together with a raven bringing them a loaf of bread. And St. Paul the Hermit typically would have a raven bring him a half a loaf of bread each day that helped him to survive in the wilderness. But on the day that Anthony met him, the raven brought him a full loaf of bread, giving St. Paul an understanding that God had it for St. Paul to meet someone that day. Furthermore, St. Anthony was revealed in his prayers that there was another monk in the wilderness, and so that led him to St. Paul the Hermit. Nowadays, there's a Christian monastic community that is all around the world, and one of the starting points was the life of St. Anthony. His way of life helps us to see that life is a combination of work and prayer, and that there may be many attacks and assaults by the demons and the spiritual warfare in this life, but one can persevere through the difficult times through fixing their thoughts on God, not giving into the bodily passions and desires, and encouraging and helping one another, which can all help them to persevere and better influence those around us for the better. Learning about inspirational stories such as the life of St. Anthony can help one to persevere during difficult times, can focus on the heavenly life as well as trying to live their life according to the same ways that St. Anthony lived his, perhaps giving people ways of coping when they're feeling worried, sad, or struggling. Many people over the course of St. Anthony's life were going through difficulties and challenges, but when they sought his advice or prayers, they left away feeling much better and often healed. So may the life of St. Anthony be a pleasant reminder that through God, anything is possible.